Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so delighted to introduce today's guest, Catie Harris. Catie is a nursepreneur mentor who has empowered thousands of nurses in business to monetize their knowledge and skills while inspiring them to change the way healthcare is perceived and delivered. She strives to undo the perception that nursing care is limited to the hospital setting. Through her intensive nurse business coaching program, Catie shows nurses around the world how their hard-earned knowledge and skills can transcend the hospital system into a profitable business. Please join me in welcoming Catie Harris. Welcome, Catie.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. Thank you for joining us from your home office in the Philadelphia area. So, Catie, as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we like to begin at the beginning and learn a little bit about your formative years, the younger Catie, and how those years may or may not have informed where you are today. So take us back to that time.
Okay, so I grew up. I always I always think about like my childhood. We actually moved around quite a bit. So I was in multiple different schools as a young kid. And, I wasn't the type of kid that socialized easily. So it was tough. It wasn't too bad when I switched in the first grade and then in the fourth grade. But when I switched in like the seventh grade, the time where you're like really self-conscious and
yes,
things and aware of, I don't know, kind of being dorky or nerdy. And,
I think that time is hard, even if you haven't moved anywhere.
Yeah. So, and my parents did what they, thought was best in my best interest. They took me out of one school, put me in another. It was like socially devastating for, you don't think of it. You just think, oh, kids will get over it and stuff. But that seventh grade year was just so socially awkward for me, and it just sent me inward. I tend to be very introverted anyway, but it was just one of those years that still impacts me today. Still impacts a lot of the things that I do or don't do, for that matter. It was just rough. And then, of course, I went off to high school after that, and and then college, and none of those years stick out as impactful or as, that kind of the fork in the road as the seventh grade did.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said that that time, that seventh grade time sort of sent you inward. Did you emerge from some of that in some ways when you say, like high school, college wasn't quite as remarkable, or what happened?
I think especially because I went to nursing school, and I remember, you have to do clinicals, obviously, in nursing school, and we go into the hospital and stuff, and I would pretty much try and hide. Hide in the supply room, constantly looking for supplies or something like that. It was intimidating to go in and introduce myself to patients, especially as a nursing student, because you don't feel important. And, I have this feeling of like, I don't want to bother people, right? So I felt like a bother, and I saw myself as a bother.
Yeah.
So in nursing school, it made it very difficult. Like some nursing students were like amazing. They would just went in, did their thing. But yeah, and I got called out on it a couple of times. I'm lucky I passed because I was always hiding in clinical. So,
well, it's interesting though. I'm curious, what made you decide to go into nursing?
I had a dream, and the dream told me to go into nursing. So
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't on the radar at all. Like, I was playing around with all kinds of, I'll be a judge, I'll be this, I'll be that. I can't even remember half the things. Every day it was something new. And then one day I came down and I said, I'm going to be a nurse. And my parents were like, okay, whatever, we'll see what she says tomorrow. And
That's so interesting.
yeah, I never changed my mind, never wavered from it. I mean, my parents kept taking me to these colleges like William and Mary. I'm like, they don't even have a nursing school. My dad's like, oh, you'll change your mind. You'll change your mind.
Oh.
And I didn't. Like, it was set hard and fast. I've never been so like, I know exactly what I need to do.
Wow. That's really interesting. So, yeah, you weren't one of these kids who like, oh, I'm really good in science, and so I'm going to go in this direction, medical field, healthcare.
No,
It had
I'm the only
nothing to
one in
do with
my extended family that's even remotely in the medical field.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
So because some people go into professions that had some relationship to something maybe their parents did, or because there's a familiarity there, but you had this dream and that just sort of stuck with you. That's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so but then there you are in clinicals in nursing school, and you're going into the supply closet and things. You're thinking, what are you thinking then? Like, what did I do?
I never thought it was the wrong profession. I just thought there was something wrong with me that I couldn't go in and talk to people. So yeah, I mean, you get through it. The worst rotation was psych, because there's no hiding. There is no supply.
There's no supplies.
And you just have to sit and talk to people. So I would, try and find somebody that was so off the wall that I could just sit there and they would, talk my ear off. And that worked somewhat. So,
wow.
But yeah, and when I graduated, it no longer felt like I was a burden, because I was their nurse. Like, I had to go in and talk to them. And I developed a sense of self-confidence working as a nurse, and having knowing what I knew. That helped a lot. And then I went to nurse practitioner school, and as a nurse practitioner, I worked in a very, very small hospital, but it was focused in one niche. All we did was cerebrovascular neurosurgery. So aneurysms, AVMs, like cavernomas, all that kind of vascular injury stuff. And it was intense, and I knew my stuff, and I had a self-confidence in that role that honestly I haven't had since. Like, I felt like I was the orchestrator of the unit. Like, I ran the unit. The neurosurgeons didn't want to run the unit. They trusted me to do it. So, like, everybody came to me, and it was like the most, amazing. It was a big high.
Wow. So so it sounds like somehow you grew through or beyond some of your introversion in a way that enabled you to really, it sounds like you enjoyed nursing, and therefore you went on to get the nurse practitioner license, and then working in this specialty hospital. You mentioned a whole bunch of acronyms there. I'm not but dealing with people with vascular injuries and surgeries, and you became kind of the go-to person in certain ways on the unit you were on. So you were really a leader at that point.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I think that helped me is that I'm not the most talkative person. I'm not a big, chit chatter, small talk type of person. Just kind of like, let's just get down to the meat here. And it helped a lot that I enjoy listening. And so they would send me into all the rooms where, like, the families were, the difficult families, or the pissed off families, or everybody angry, because I would walk in, listen to them, and by the time they were done venting about how angry they were, they're like, "Oh, thank you so much. You've been so helpful." And I'm like, anything. All I did was take your anger and your wrath. and then just let it go. But it worked out that way. So that helped me a lot.
So you were the anger whisperer.
Yes. I mean, some people they just need to be heard. It was very valuable lesson that they just
I can really appreciate that though. It's great to hear that because I think that too often people misunderstand the value that introversion can bring to an organization or to other people. I think sometimes it's misunderstood as one thing or another thing. And so I appreciate you sharing that. So how long were you in that hospital, working in that specialty hospital?
So I started in that hospital in 1999, and I basically 20 years. So 2019 was the last time I. So
wow.
Yeah.
And were you in a similar role that time, or did your positions change over time there?
So I was a nurse and then the nurse practitioner. Yeah. And I'm the type of person that always wants to learn and keep learning. So, I've got multiple degrees because I just like collecting degrees, and I want to learn something. And neurosurgery it's a very steep learning curve. You're in this fog for a long time, just trying to understand like the brain and the spine and all the things that you need to know about it, and then the different disease states and how they happen and that kind of stuff. So it took a couple of years for me to really get on top of that.
Wow.
And there was also opportunities to constantly be learning. So when I first started, it was just about discharging or sending patients home. And I'm like, well, this is fine, but I want to do other things. So then I started inserting myself into the ICU and taking care of the critically ill patients.
Oh.
And I started doing the lines, and then I wanted to go into the OR. So I, inserted myself into the operating room to operate with the neurosurgeons. And then I went and set up a neurovascular center with one of my neurosurgeons for our hospital system. So it was always something I kept jumping to, like, what else can I do? And then I finally got to the end of that rope, and there wasn't there wasn't anything else to jump to out of the hospital, and so that's what I did.
So yeah, I mean, it sounds like you really covered the entire process of a potential patient journey.
Yep, outpatient, ED, ICU, OR, all of it. And it was all in the same specialty with the same group. So it was very like, I got the training in a lot of ways that simulated what the I don't want to say I got the same training as the residents because that was very intense for them.
Yeah.
But it got kind of that whole picture like they do.
Wow. That's amazing. Were there, I don't think I've ever spoken with anyone with a nurse practitioner credential who has then sort of worked their way through so many different sort of layers and levels of an area like that. Is that something that other people did as well, or would you say it's unusual?
I think it's unusual. And like I said, it's just my personality type.
Yeah.
One of the things that I had said to myself when I was younger, which is probably a curse more than anything, but I was like, I just don't want to ever be content. And I think I meant that I don't want to ever just, do nothing because I felt like I had achieved, whatever state. But it's a blessing and a curse because never being content is always throwing me into like new things constantly, which is exhausting sometimes. But for me to stay in one area and do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
I took on a teaching job, so I'm a professor at the university. So I teach like the nurse practitioner students, and that was part of what I did after my son was born. And I couldn't really do what I did with neurosurgery because I was on call, like going in the night. When my son was born, and I'm a single mom, I'm like, I can't go in the middle of the night and leave my son.
No, you can't bring him with you either.
Yeah, I can't bring him with me because I got called in one night for an aneurysm patient, and it was like they started at 11 o'clock at night. I mean, we weren't done until after 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I just can't do this. Like,
right. Wow. So you were in the surgery area, and then you had your son, and you started, were you teaching and doing the neurovascular center at the same
yeah, so I
time?
went, per diem. So I would work one weekend a month. I was working with the neurosurgery group, and then the College of Nursing is a much nicer lifestyle, but it's boring as crap. And after the first year was fun, right? Because I got to create all my courses and that.
Yeah.
And then every year after that, it's just like you're teaching the same thing. And for me, teaching is like, I don't know, it's very frustrating because I'm like, I already taught this, and what's the point of teaching? But I get frustrated because I'm like, why don't you people know this? And it's like, well, because you didn't teach it yet. Because
you're a whole new group of students.
Because you're all new students.
But it's interesting though that you learn that about yourself. I mean, you wouldn't have known that until you started teaching, though.
Right.
And so now, where were you teaching? What college of nursing was it?
It's Jefferson University in Philadelphia.
Oh,
and
okay.
I teach the Transformative Systems Leadership, and I'm in my first year of that. So I'm going through that part. It's all new right now, so it's exciting.
Well, take us forward. So 2019 was the last year you worked with the neurosurgery group or neurovascular group. Is that right?
No, that was the last time in the hospital. I finished the OR in August of 2020 when COVID hit. I had that aneurysm case, and I
see.
You know what, I'm done. And I went into the OR one day and I said, I'm moving to Mexico, and they all laughed. And I'm like, I'm not kidding. Like, don't put me on the schedule next month. And my son and I moved to Mexico for a year. So I was
my goodness.
And I took the whole year off, and then I never went back to either the hospital or the OR. And I'm quite happy I didn't.
Wow. So you moved to Mexico for a year. What provoked that decision? I'm curious.
My son was going into the third grade, and obviously the schools in Pennsylvania had been called off, right? They were just going to be on Zoom. And I got a taste of Zoom, in March, from March to May, and I was like, no, I'm not. And I had an au pair at the time, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Worked the OR and a single mom.
Sure.
And the au pair was leaving in August of 2020 as well, and I'm like, all I could see was me, my son Matthew on Zoom, and me yelling at him to pay attention for a year. And I'm like, it can't work like this. So I had done this podcast interview with a nurse who was down in Mexico, and I called her up and I'm like, who's your real estate agent down there? So she gave me her number. I called her up. She's like, oh, there's a school down here. It was a private school run by this British guy. And
wow.
They were doing in-person classes, and I'm like, I'm coming down. So the real estate agent got me an oceanfront, 3-bedroom apartment, super cheap. And it was like the best year of my life.
Wow. Now that people have heard this on the podcast, they're going to be getting in touch with you saying, what was the name of that agent?
Awesome. Absolutely. I'll refer.
It's like, don't you want to hear about nursepreneurs? No. I want to hear about this place in Mexico you live. But you decided to come back to the US after the year.
Yeah. I mean, my family's here.
Yeah.
And school was back in session. And like I said, multiple times, I'm a single mom. So I need, I just need support.
Sure. What a wonderful opportunity, though, that you were able to make that happen.
Yeah. Plus the rates went, sky high. Like COVID year, those round trip tickets, they were like $250 per person.
Yeah.
I bought for Thanksgiving. I bought round trip tickets for Christmas, and Easter, and then for the and it cost me like $1,000 for the whole year to buy tickets for both of us.
Wow.
It was great.
Wow. So you were able to really stay connected the whole year and everything.
Yeah. Now they're like $1,000 each.
Wow. So during that time in Mexico, your son was in school. You got a chance to, sounds like, take a little time for yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely. Every night, because we had this porch, it was beautiful. And this was a really bad habit to get into, but every night I had the porch, and watching they were surfers and kite surfers that were out there, and I loved watching them. I had
Yeah.
some wine, and just I did a lot of sitting that year. Just
Yeah.
the breeze was amazing. This wind
Yeah.
that would come off the ocean or the Caribbean was so incredible, and I would just sit there. And yeah, I gained like 20 pounds just sitting there and drinking wine. But it was worth it.
I love it. I'm thinking, what part of this is a bad idea? I'm not sure. I haven't heard much that's a bad idea. And so when you went back to Philly, I mean, I don't know whether you had taken a leave from the hospital or you had totally resigned
I
or
just resigned, yeah.
I
That's
see.
what I'm done.
So so during that time away, were you thinking about what was next, or what was your process career-wise at that point?
Well, at that time, I was also teaching, so I had my full-time teaching
Oh,
job, and that was all remote.
oh,
So I was still getting paid.
oh, you were still teaching. Okay, okay, got
Yeah,
it.
but everything was remote. It used to be that we had to go into the College of Nursing 5 days a week, and now they're like,
Sure,
you can't come in at all. And I'm like, well, if I
right.
can't come in at all, then I'm
Might
going
as
to
well.
sit at
Yeah,
home. Yeah, I may as well
sure.
sit on the porch in Mexico. Uh,
Right.
and with Matthew, I never would have pulled him out of school, especially
Yeah.
after my experience. I would have kept him where he was for
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
8 years. But if he was just going to be on Zoom, I'm like, well, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what, as you were sitting there sipping your wine and, still teaching, um, what were you imagining your life would be like once you decided to go back to Philly?
Um, yeah, I don't think I thought it was going to be any different. I was running Nursepreneurs at the time as well. So we did a
Oh,
lot
you
of work.
were?
Mhm. I started Nursepreneurs in 2016. So and it was kind
Oh,
of like a side hustle for a couple of years. And then 2019 is when I really started making some money. And 2020 was one of our best years ever for like webinars and helping nurses to start businesses. So it
well,
was,
then
we
let's
were quite
go
busy.
there because
Yeah.
I'm very curious to know then what what made you decide, or what occurred to you that made you decide to start Nursepreneurs? I mean, that to me really caught my attention. This idea of not even the idea of nurses working in other settings other than hospitals, because I know plenty of nurses who work in lots of other settings, but they're still practicing nursing. They're not thinking like business people necessarily, or thinking specifically in a way of monetizing their knowledge and their skills the way that you're teaching them to do with Nursepreneur.
Right. I
Um,
mean,
so
yeah,
how did that come about? How did you even think of that?
for me, it was, when I told you, I kind of went through all the different aspects of being a nurse practitioner, and I'm like, what's next? What's next?
Ah,
And there was no what's next. It's, just do what we told you to do, and don't step out of your lane. And that's not me. And I really wanted in order to stay in that position,
mm,
it was like I'd had to shove a lot of stuff down, like the
mm,
frustration and the irritation, and
mm,
the not care, like caring, like a lot of times you would bring up issues, or hey, this needs to change or whatever. It was just it was dismissed. So then you become apathetic, and when a big problem
yeah,
comes up, you're like, well, that's just how we do things here, apparently. So, and you know, it's a horrible way to be,
right,
not to
right,
care about the way things go.
yeah,
And I needed something that I could continue growing in.
sure,
So uh, I had gotten a position, this would have been 2014, 2015, around there, with Walmart. And Walmart hired me to be their senior talent acquisition manager, to recruit nurse practitioners into the clinics that they had down south.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, my job was literally to travel to the different clinics. I traveled to like major organizations. We were like I don't know, diamond, platinum's partner of like the AAMP, which is our American Association of Nurse Practitioners. So I met all those people and then went to like Geneva and met international nurses and that kind of stuff. But in that process, I started meeting nurses who were running their own businesses, who were doing things that were completely outside of my scope of understanding what nursing was.
Really?
Yeah, and it was absolutely fascinating. And I started to interview them. And that was the beginning of my podcast, just because I was like, I couldn't wrap my mind around how they were doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was fascinating.
So you started interviewing them and recording those interviews as a podcast. What made you decide to make it into a podcast?
I don't remember. Like, I don't remember how I knew to do a podcast. One of the first ones that I did, it was this woman, her name's Diana Mason, and she's amazing. She's a nurse. And I remember meeting her in Geneva at this meeting that I was at for Walmart. And she had run, or I think she still does, but she had a radio show.
Huh.
And I'm like, well, how do you just have a radio show? And then she was telling me about her other businesses and stuff. And I'm like, well, let's go back to the radio. Like, how do you just start a radio? Like, where do you go? Like, what is the first thing that you do? Like, what is step one for starting a radio show? And this would have been, like I said, in 2016. And, so she's like, well, let's talk about it. So we jumped on, I recorded the session, and that was like one of my first podcast episodes. And then it was just like, all right, well, who else can I talk to? And find out more. And then I'd hear like this guy started a CPR business, and this person started a concierge nurse business, and this person's running a med spa. And so, yeah, it was just kind of like going down that path.
Wow. So that's so interesting. It kind of takes me back to, even though it's not the same thing, it's still, there's something organic about the way that you followed your curiosity from one thing to the next. And yet I think back to, you had that dream about becoming a nurse and you didn't question it. You just said, that's just it. It just felt right. And all these other things that you've done within the nurse practitioner realm, let's say, were all things that made sense in some ways. And yet it sounds like you went above and beyond what many people in your role would have done. But it does feel like sort of an evolutionary process in some ways. And the last thing I expected you to say was, I got a job with Walmart. And I'm like, wait a minute, Walmart? Until you said, what you were doing for them. But I didn't realize that Walmart had anything to do with nursing or clinics or anything like that.
Yeah, no, my family used to tease me at dinners and stuff, and they'd be like, clean up on aisle 4. And I'm like,
well, and when you first said Walmart, I was like, well, that's different for sure. Did you get a little blue vest? But then to have that role, then, you think about Walmart being so American. And next thing you know, you're going to these conferences and meeting people in other parts of the world. It's like this whole other world opened up to you.
Yeah.
And you just stepped right through.
Right.
This is the kid who, in 7th grade couldn't hide out enough. And there you were, stepping through one door and the next door and the next door, meeting people, interviewing them. And I'm not saying you became like, the life of the party at that point.
Not by a long stretch.
but yet it's an interesting, it's sort of an interesting picture that you're painting in terms of finding some things that just piqued your thirst for learning and taking something that you knew and loved and moving it in a number of different directions is fascinating. I don't know that a lot of people would think of nursing in that way and then would think about how they could still be helpful to other people, but also take care of themselves at the same time, and learn new things, learn business skills. It's just fascinating.
Right. Well,
Absolutely
I didn't
fascinating.
know it could be done either until I
Right.
met them, and then it was just kind of like I felt like I'd been walking in this myopic bubble for so long because I couldn't think. The only path that I could see when I was a nurse practitioner, I was super frustrated, was like, all right, well, if I'm tired with neurosurgery, then maybe I'll go work for orthosurgery. But like, that's just a lateral move. It's not, and after 3 months, and I actually did work for orthopedic surgery, and it took me like 3 months to get the hang of it, right? Because once you have one specialty, one surgical specialty, the rest of them, it's just kind of like, all right, it's not that hard to figure out.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, I could go to ENT or urologic surgery, but it's the same thing. I could run the whole gamut, but it wouldn't, that time frame would get less and less. I needed something completely new.
Mm-hmm. So tell us this started with a few interviews, and now you've got a whole business that you're running from this. What does that look like?
Yeah. I have to say, like in the early, I probably could have bought that stupid condo in Mexico for all the money I spent trying to like business. And, I have an MBA as well, but that wasn't very helpful. But I went to these masterminds and, bought course after course after course. I was like addicted to them. And, the masterminds were really helpful. They gave me the self-confidence of like, I can do this. And I went to this one mastermind where these people were like amazing and very accepting of me being in there, because I felt kind of like I don't belong here.
You mean, were these like entrepreneurial type masterminds?
Entrepreneurial, yeah, absolutely. But then they started talking about things that they were doing. Like one person was running like a breast cancer support group and making money from it, or they were doing content writing. And I'm like, well, nurses could do this. And that's where it's really kind of like, and then from the podcast interviews, I met nurses who were doing the exact things that I was hearing the other entrepreneurs doing. And I'm like, why don't you make a course about this? And then we would collaborate and start selling those courses. And that's how it really took off.
Wow. So rather than just shining a light on what everyone else was doing, you were starting to show other people how they could do it as well.
Exactly.
Wow. And so that continues to be what you're doing, but you're also coaching people. Is that right?
Yeah. So it evolved. I mean, I started out coaching in 2019. But again, I had the same problem of, I already taught this. So I'm like, I can't be the coach. We hire nurses. A lot of them come from our podcast after interviewing them and stuff. We'll ask them if they're interested in coaching, obviously if we like them, and then vet them from there and then pair them up with the nurses depending on what they want to do. So that takes me into that aspect of it.
So you have a number of people working under your umbrella, so to speak, providing these services.
Right. Yeah. Because the hardest part is, any coach knows if you put out a shingle and says you're a coach, like people don't start banging down your door. Like there's a whole trust factor and a brand that comes with it. And that's what we've built over the years.
Wow. And so what is there, are you still doing the podcast as well?
I am. Yes.
Yeah.
We have about 250 episodes at this point.
Well, that's about the same amount of episodes I have too. I guess we're on parallel paths in that way. So if someone wanted to learn more about what you're doing, or if there's some other way that they would want to access your programs and services, because it sounds like there's coaching, there's classes, there's your podcast. Is there anything we're missing?
Last year we got into marketing and helping the nurses to market their services. So that's a big part of what we're focused on right now.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Wow. Yeah. Wow. So, what would be the best way for someone to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, definitely go to nursepreneurs.com. We do have a live widget there that will connect you, answer questions, and then there's also an ability to sign up to have a consult with our team and just talk about, like, we're not salesy, we don't push anything. A lot of our calls are just kind of chatting with the nurses, and maybe they come back 6 months later, maybe they don't, but it's all good, and it's all about supporting them and helping them find their way.
That's great. Wow. It sounds like a powerful group of people too. I just get this feeling about it. And so you've made a number of changes over the years. What would be a key piece of advice you might give to someone else who's considering their next move career-wise?
I would, kind of keeping on the theme of curiosity, it would really about being, to trust your instincts and follow your curiosity to where it goes. Because that has certainly helped me, but I think, nurses in particular have a very strong intuition that we don't always talk about, but
Yeah.
it's one of the more powerful soft skills that we have.
Yes.
And, to ignore it has always sent me in the wrong direction. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of different opportunities out there, and just be curious and search them out.
Love it. Oh, this is great. And when you got the MBA thrown in there too, which
Yeah.
wow.
I forget it sometimes.
Can't keep up with all that education.
Yeah.
This is great. I'm just so excited about what you're doing for all of the nurses. And I can imagine there will be lots of people who will be very interested in taking a closer look at what you're bringing to the world. This is great. Catie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of my interview with Catie Harris. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 245. And while there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. If you are feeling it, please help me to inspire more people to grow their careers by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button right there. Leave an honest rating and brief review. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out. Break through 9 common obstacles and design a career that fulfills you. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. You can also help sustain the podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is acknowledged and appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I always love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.